Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Today's little video is going to be a little tech tip. I'm going to show you my version of a cold air intake, and it's not what you think. First, I'm going to show you I got new gaskets. I'll try to link the video down below, but if you want to see how I make my gaskets, I've got a great video on the channel if you haven't seen it already. But yeah, I'm busy working on the engine here, and I'm going to show you a couple little things I like to do. And first I got to dig them up. All right, it's a pretty simple process here, a very inexpensive process too. And I will point out my version works on swing axles. I'm not sure how you do this on an IRS. I've never owned an IRS car, and I'm sure there's a way. I did see this tip way back when. I can't remember if it was on the Calic forum. It might have been on the Calic forum, or if it was something I pulled out of Hot VW's magazine. But it's a great tech tip, and it's a cold air intake. I know. Most cold air intakes are for the engine. You know, air filter. You know, you get rid of the stock system because it's, you know, got a lot of silencers and restraints and stuff, and it runs right into your throttle body, giving your engine some fresh, cooler air, and supposedly you're supposed to gain some horsepower. But no, this is for an air-cooled engine. This is the cold air intake to cool your engine. And I'll kind of show you how this works. All right, if you're not familiar with the air-cooled Volkswagen engine, this whole thing, this upper part here, is what they call a fan shroud. Now what the fan shroud does is it's got this big squirrel fan in here, and it sucks in cool air. And you got a picture, there's going to be a firewall here for the car. And this is your bell housing, you call it, your rear bell housing tin. But this fan, this big squirrel fan, of course, spins around in here, and it's driven by the alternator and the crank. There's a belt, of course, that those two connect. And yeah, if you ever drop your alternator belt, yeah, you want to stop and slow down, because if you don't, you're going to burn your engine up, because that is what drives the fan. And basically the fan, you know, like I said, sucks in air, and then it distributes the air around this whole housing here. And this is a doghouse style fan shroud, meaning it's a later style. They actually moved the oil cooler out of the fan housing into the its own little cavity, and it gets its own little air blast, which basically shoots through the oil cooler, which you can't see it, but it sits in here. Trust me, it's there, and shoots right down on the outside of the bell housing here. So it's outside the engine, you know, shooting the hot air outside the engine compartment. The rest of the air is distributed down over top of your cylinders and your heads, and basically it comes out the bottom. Now on a stock engine, there's these big heater boxes here, which retain heat. I don't run them. Basically they're designed to retain heat and to, you know, heat your car. I don't drive the car in the winter, and I don't really need it. But on a stock shroud, you would have little air cutouts here that would actually go down into those heater boxes, and the heater box's job is to collect the heat off the exhaust. Like I said, I'm not running those. If you're not going to ever run them, I suggest getting a fan shroud where those are cut off, or make sure you plug those holes. If you don't, you're going to lose a lot of your air that's going to cool your engine. So we'll come back over here on this side here. Here's the first little tech tip I'm going to do. Of course, most of you guys know when you get this aftermarket engine stuff, a lot of times it doesn't fit really well. And there's actually three pieces here. You got your fan shroud, one little air duct or doghouse duct, and then the lower doghouse duct. I don't really remember what they call those, but basically their job is basically to get the hot air out of the engine compartment. And since they don't fit well, there's always gaps. So we use the old duct tape trick. It kind of helps seal it up. That way you are getting all the air flow out of the engine. There's a little gap down underneath there, but apparently the factory wasn't worried about that. That's one of the reasons, if you ever seen these heads, they got all these fins on them, and then you got the fins on your cylinders. Those are all to dissipate heat. This is fairly inexpensive to build because it's all used or built out of PVC. And even with today's market, PVC is still cheap. I mean, this probably cost me less than roughly $10 back when I built it 15, 20 years ago. But the first thing you're going to have to do is cut yourself a big hole here in your bell housing. And the idea is to get this threaded piece. This is 1.5 inch PVC, but just threaded piece. You cut it so it's the same size as that. And this little S basically fits in the bell housing here, and then it's going to shoot the air into the fan. And then the nice thing about this is you get the, of course this is the male, and then you get the female, and that's going to hold it in place. Just like that. Pretty simple. Now, the other end, if you remember me talking about the holes in the fan shroud that route the hot air into the heater boxes that I don't run, that's what this piece is, okay? This is an aftermarket one. The factory is more of a paper style, but it works great for this purpose. And the reason you need it flexible, or at least I do, like I said, I'm running a swing axle, is because we're going to hang this big funnel system with this hose clamp from the axle tube. Now on the swing axles, there's an axle tube, and the axle runs inside the axle tube, so the axle inside is spinning, the tube's not. Unlike your IRS, which is a CV joint, and the axle's open and spin, so you don't want to hang this from that. Unless you got some fancy bearing system, and now we're not talking inexpensive. But no, I wouldn't recommend that. There's got to be another place underneath the car to hang this big funnel. But yeah, then again, we're back to an elbow, 1.5 inch, and we use the 1.5 inch tube, cut it down a little bit. Same here, there's a 1.5 inch pipe that's in there, just a little bit, enough to use for a barb fitting, you'd call it. Basically like the same end that's over here. You only need about an inch, 1.5 inches sticking out. And that's where this is going to go. You're going to mount this on here, using a hose clamp to tighten it down, and then this is going to fit on the axle. And this funnel will now sit underneath the car, and it'll collect air, cool air, because it's coming from underneath the car, not in the engine compartment, and it's going to direct it into this pipe, which is going to direct it into the fan shroud. I never did any testing to see how much of an improvement this is, whether it's an improvement at all. In my head, it seems like a good idea. I haven't run it in the last few years. I did run it this year when I made an 80-mile round trip up and back and forth to Uncle John's cider mill. Now the next thing you're going to want to do is get yourself a little section of screen door. This is just a screen they put on a screen door, and then a larger hose clamp, and clamp that on there. That's going to keep any debris like leaves or stones or rocks or critters that may try to make their way up into your engine compartment. Last thing you want to do is fill this up with leaves or dirt or anything, because then it's going to fill up on the bottom of your, or not the bottom, then it's going to fill up on your top of your cylinders, and you don't want to do that, because then you're going to defeat the purpose of cooling the engine. Which leads me to another thing. If you ever buy a engine out of a barn or something that's been sitting around for a while, you may want to take the fan shroud off, because critters like to get in there and they'll build their nest on top of the cylinders there, and now you got a bunch of whatever they use to insulate for their homes collected on the top of those cylinders, and well, you know what mice like to do, like to pee all over that stuff. And man, I wish I had a picture of those cylinder heads that Jim Green's got up at his place there, from that exact same thing where mice had built on top. I mean, the heads are literally melded just from years and years of mice getting in there and peeing on them. But yeah, that's it. That's pretty simple to build. I'll try to grab a picture of the little hook. I basically welded a little hook on the bottom of the axle tube to hook this to. I think I've got a picture of it. If not, I'll grab one and show you guys. But yeah, with a few pieces of plastic, hose clamps, and a flexible hose, and a funnel. I think it was a 4-inch funnel. Where's my measuring device? No, that's a 5-inch into 1.5-inch funnel. You can have yourself a cold air intake for your air-cooled Volkswagen. So yeah, pretty cheap, pretty inexpensive. As always, thanks for joining me. Keep shifting those gears, and I hope this tech tip helps. See ya. Just another guy